subsequent broadcast by the Wales Council's internet site. The images and sounds are recording may also be used for training purposes within the Council. As you will see from the agenda papers, generally the public seating areas are not filmed. However, by entering the meeting room and using the public seating area, you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings by webcasting and or trading purposes. Proposed public speakers have been made aware of the broadcasting arrangements prior to the meeting. Will members please use their microphones to contribute to the meeting, and please remember to switch off the microphones when you are finished. Members dialing in remotely, please only turn on your camera when you wish to speak, and please remember to switch it off when you have finished. Also, could you ensure that you refrain from using any mobile devices during the committee, and that any devices are on silent. Okay, thank you. We have apologies for Councillor Jordan. I think everybody else is present. Does anybody have any declarations of interest? No? Okay, thank you. We'll go to the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of February, which are on page 3. I won't go through them by page and agenda items, but so could I have a proposer for true record, please? Councillor Perkins and seconder, Councillor Jones. Thank you. Now go on to item number 1, which is 24/0007, which is Jackson Place, and this will be presented by Grant Hawkins. Thank you. Sorry. That's the next item. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So this application seeks planning permission for the change of use of 11 Jackson Place from a dwelling house to a 5-bedroom house in multiple occupation, known as a HMO, and for the construction of a rear dormer roof extension. The application has been called to Planning Committee by Ward Councillors Hussain and Horton. The application is a resubmission of the recently refused application for a 6-bedroom HMO with construction of rear dormer roof extension that was refused under delegated powers in 2023 for the following reason. The proposal, owing to its reliance on roof lights serving bedroom 5, would result in an unacceptable provision of residential amenity for the future occupier, contrary to policies GP2 and H8 of the Newport Local Development Plan. So the site is located within a residential cul-de-sac to the west of Albert Avenue, which is predominantly a residential road running north to south, linking Chepstow Road with Summerhill Avenue. Jackson Place is characterised by 2 terraces of bay-fronted dwellings of a similar character and design before entering a cluster of more recently built residential properties at Jackson Court. The site is located in what is considered to be a generally sustainable location, with access to bus stops on Summerhill Avenue and Victoria Avenue, approximately 250 metres from the site. The main district centre is 350 metres from the site, and other local amenities such as Summerhill Church, the Crown Inn Public House and St Joseph's Primary School within 150 metres. So that just provides some context for the local area. As you can see on the Google Earth image here, the application site is highlighted in red. The property is a well-presented mid-terrace dwelling, as you can see from the first photograph here. At Jackson Place, it represents as a 2-storey property with small front forecourt, but owing to the topographical changes at the site, and like all other properties on this side of Jackson Place, it extends 3 storeys at the rear, as you can see in the central photo here. It is an enclosed rear garden measuring approximately 40 square metres, and laying beyond is the rear of a row of terrace properties at Fair Oak Avenue. These 2 photographs show the terrace of properties either side of Jackson Place, and as you can see, they are generally well presented and maintained, of a similar design and character, and whilst they benefit from a small front forecourt, they all rely on on-street parking. So these are the existing layout plans. The property is accessed from Jackson Place at ground floor level. A staircase leads down to the lower ground floor kitchen and dining area, and there is a rear door that provides access to the rear enclosed garden and an externally accessed toilet. At ground floor, the existing plans show a front lounge and a bedroom to the rear. The addition of this fourth bedroom has been queried by local objectors, with it being stated that the property has always been a 3-bedroom dwelling and not 4. The sales particulars from October 2023 also suggest that this fourth bedroom is actually a living room. Whether the property is a 3 or 4 bedroom property is largely academic in terms of the planning assessment, and it does not alter the fact that the fallback position is a single dwelling house capable of occupation by a family and with a parking demand of 3 spaces as per the council's parking standards. At first floor, there are 3 bedrooms and a bathroom. Turning to the proposed floor plans, the proposed layout includes 4 ensuite bedrooms over the ground floor and first floor, with a 5th ensuite bedroom being proposed within the roof space by the construction of a flat roof dormer extension to the rear, shown in blue on the second floor plan here. The lower ground floor would provide the open plan kitchen and lounge area, and cycle storage is proposed within an unused corridor space on the lower ground and ground floor levels. This is the dormer extension on the right hand side, which we'll touch upon in the design assessment later on in the presentation. Turning to the front forecourt, refuge storage provision is proposed within the front forecourt that is set behind the low boundary wall and would be contained within the timber structure shown and submitted within the plans here. As you can see from the photograph on the right hand side, the existing properties store their refuse receptacles in this way currently, albeit not within a covered store, but behind the walls. So this would not introduce a new element of storage to the existing streetscape. So moving on to the assessment, the first part of this looks at the HMO concentration and impact on the character and appearance of the area. This has been one of the heavy objections from local residents within those received. So policy H8 is the local development plan policy used to assess HMOs and their impact on character and appearance of the local area. Policy H8 confirms that HMO proposals will be permitted if the scale and intensity does not cause a harm to the character of the building and the locality. It does not create an over-concentration of HMOs in any one area, as well as considering the impact on parking, neighbouring amenity and the amenity of future occupiers. There has been significant objection from local residents in relation to this. Issues such as antisocial behaviour and crime and disorder have also been raised as concerns in the objections received. When assessing the concentration of HMOs, the adopted HMO Supplementary Planning Guidance document sets out a 50-metre radius test that needs to be undertaken. Members of the committee will be familiar with this from other presentations for HMOs brought to committee. In this instance, there are 51 residential properties captured within the 50-metre radius, and there is currently no other HMOs present. So you can see the 50-metre radius highlighted in blue here, taken from the address point of number 11 and capturing the front elevation of 51 properties within that radius. The site is located within an area that would allow a maximum of 15% concentration of HMOs within the 50-metre radius area, and if this application were to be approved, then it would constitute a 1.96% of the housing stock. This is significantly below the 15% maximum threshold set out within the guidance document. Gwent Police have been consulted on the application and have responded confirming that Jackson Place is a low-demand location in terms of crime, and they have not raised an objection to the proposal. Local residents have cited a previous HMO in this street that has caused issues of crime, disorder and disturbance to residents, and that this needed to be closed down. No further information has been provided in relation to this, and there is no recent record of such a HMO being granted planning permission or a licence, so it can only be thought that this property was unlicensed and not managed appropriately. Given the issues that may have occurred, residents' concerns are understood and have been fully considered within the full officer assessment set out in the report. The only record of a licensed HMO on Jackson Place expired approximately 12 years ago, as confirmed by the Environmental Health Licensing Department, and it is understood that this property is back in use as a single dwelling house now, and there are no further antisocial issues that have been noted. In terms of the qualitative considerations, the application street and surrounding streets within the 50-metre radius are generally in good condition and are well looked after, and there are no signs of fly tipping or collection of waste that might result in an adverse visual impact or indicate any signs of social cohesion issues. So these are some photos. This is taken at Jackson Place, on the bottom two, and then properties on Albert Avenue. Just a few site photos there, just showing that the properties generally are in a reasonable condition and that there's no obvious signs of deterioration or matters of relating to social cohesion problems. As such, based on the information available and the assessment against the necessary guidelines and policy, there is no robust evidence to suggest that the proposed HMO would result in any adverse impact on the character, appearance or social cohesion of the area. Moving on to the proposed layouts. The proposed layout of the property is acceptable, with the kitchen and living room and each bedroom exceeding the minimum size requirements for HMO licensing purposes. The rooms would have adequate natural light, outlook and ventilation, and that would provide an acceptable level of residential amenity. So I've just put the proposed floor plans back out there for committee to view. All of those bedrooms exceed the minimum requirement for HMO licensing size requirements. They have ensuite facilities, adequate windows, ventilation, light, as mentioned. And across the top, there are some photos taken from a site visit recently to the site. As you can see, the property is undergoing external renovation at present. This is not development, and it does not require planning permission. But again, it just shows indicates the size of those rooms, the window openings, and their sort of a general feel for the layout, which hopefully is useful for committee members. The conditional regime does include a control to a maximum of 5 occupants at the property, and this is to preserve neighbouring and future residential amenity, as well as ensuring that the proposed dormer is completed in full prior to that final bedroom being occupied. This is to ensure that the occupier of this room has sufficient residential amenity. At 40 square metres, the outdoor rear garden space is sufficient, and opportunities for refuse and cycle storage have been made at the property. There is not considered to be any resulting harmful impact on neighbouring amenity by way of there being 5 occupants within the property, as opposed to a single family that could reasonably inhabit the existing property in similar numbers. Overall, it is considered that the proposal complies with the aims of Policy GP2, GP7 and H8, as well as complying with the guidance set out in the HMO SPG document. So moving on to the assessment of the rear dormer. The dormer proposed would typically be permitted development that does not require planning permission if it were to be constructed as part of the existing lawful dwelling house. As it is being proposed as part of a scheme for the HMO that does require planning permission, then that means that permission is required, hence why it's been included within the application. The Householder Extensions and Domestic Outbuildings SPG advises that dormer roof extensions should be contained within the rear elevation, which this is. They should be set back from the roof eaves and set down from the roof ridge, which it is. The proposal is considered to comply with this guidance and is considered to be acceptable. There will be some views possible from Albert Avenue and Fair Oak Avenue, and this dormer would introduce a new feature within the roofscape of these terrace of properties. However, as mentioned, it is considered to be of an acceptable design and appearance and complies with the aims of Policy GP6, which looks at quality of design. So just for context, this is the rear of the properties at Jackson Place, and this is the roof of the application property. So at present there are no other additions, but when taken into account what is being proposed could be built without planning permission on any of these properties as it's proposed, and taken into account the compliance with the design criteria, officers have considered that it is an acceptable addition to the property. So moving on to matters of parking and highway safety. A significant proportion of the local objections are in relation to parking and highway safety issues resulting from this proposed change of use. In line with the Council's adopted parking standards, the existing 3 or 4 bedroom dwelling generates a parking demand of 3 spaces, and these would all need to be accommodated on street as existing. The proposed 5 bedroom HMO generates a parking demand of 1 space per bedroom and 1 visitor space per 5 bedrooms. So in total, 6 spaces. And this is a net increase of 3 spaces that need to be accommodated on street over and above the existing lawful use of the property. A parking survey has been undertaken, and following best practice methodology, using the 200-metre walking distance, 200-metre walking distance or 2-minute walking distance survey area, which is accepted, and this is shown in the aerial image to the top of the slide there. So the lines in red represent the areas within that 200-metre walking distance surveyed and submitted for consideration. The table below is an extract of the parking survey that shows the findings of the survey over the 2 evenings. Hopefully that's clear on the slide there, but I can zoom in after if needed. What that does show is that during both the surveys, Jackson Place, so the application street, was at 100% capacity. However, the parking stress of the overall survey area is a circa 79%. So this leaves approximately 20% availability within the survey area. Officers have undertaken their own site visits in relation to parking, and whilst at times it is acknowledged that parking demand was high, there were an adequate number of spaces available to accommodate that uplift in 3 parking spaces. The Council's Highways Officer has accepted the findings and has offered no objection on parking or highway safety grounds. Whilst residents' concerns and frustrations surrounding parking availability are noted, officers know from numerous appeal decisions that inspectors have a generally positive attitude to HMOs in sustainable locations, and the fact a street is at 100% parking capacity has not itself proven to be a robust reason to refuse planning permission. There are many appeal decisions whereby inspectors assume that car ownerships in HMO properties will be lower, and most notably in sustainable locations such as this site, which is within walking distance of bus stops and the main district centre, as referred to earlier on in the presentation. A recent application for a 6-bedroom HMO at 51 Albert Avenue, which is nearby this site, was also determined by Planning Committee in October 2023, when it was considered that parking in the area was acceptable. Parking evidence such as photos of parking in the local area have been submitted by residents to demonstrate the issues that they are faced with. These photos illustrate high parking demand during daytime and evenings, and this is in line with officers' own site visits, but there are spaces available. Weight has been given to this information as part of the overall assessment, along with all other information and evidence which is available. Taking into account all best available information, it is considered that proposal complies with policy GP2, GP4 and H8 in relation to parking and highway safety. In terms of cycle storage, the Council's Highways Officer has requested a condition for further details of cycle parking at the site, and has considered that the internal provision shown on the plans requires improvement. Typically, a locked shed is an acceptable form of cycle storage for a HMO. However, this would need to be located within the rear garden of the property, and this would require access through the property, down a flight of stairs to the lower ground floor, through the kitchen and lounge area, and accessed externally via the rear door. This is not considered to be a particularly friendly or usable method for storing cycles for this proposal. The area shown at ground floor at the end of the corridor, here, is of adequate size to store 4 cycles, and 4 cycles is the requirement by the Sustainable Travel SPG for a HMO of this size. In this instance, when taken into account accessibility, it is considered that the proposed cycle storage is actually acceptable, and that condition for improvement requested by the Highways Officer has not been recommended within the conditional regime. Moving on to the final slide, which looks at ecological enhancement. A bird and bat box have been proposed in the front and rear elevation of the property, and this implementation of this has been controlled through the conditional regime. It is considered that adequate ecological enhancement for the scale of the proposed development has been provided and accords with the requirements of Plan and Policy Wales Edition 12 and Policy GP5 of the Local Development Plan. So in conclusion, as outlined in full within the Officer's report and as summarised within this presentation, it is considered that the application has demonstrated compliance with the relevant local development plan policies and guidance, as well as national planning policy aims and objectives, and it is recommended that the application is granted subject to the conditional regime set out within the Officer's report. Thank you.
Thank you, Grant. Do you have a public speaker who would like to speak against it? Tegan Partner, you have 5 minutes. Okay, okay.
This application has had a huge impact on the residents of Jackson Place and the surrounding streets, ongoing since November 2023. We've all been devastated, every single house on the street. It's caused great stress and worry, and I just wanted to call that out in this meeting. We understand applications are judged on policy and material planning conditions. However, we are real people, and this is going to negatively affect us if it's approved. Over 80 people objected, and there's not been one positive comment. No amount of policy or material conditions can hide the fact that the residents of Jackson Place do not want this HMO. It's been a family 3-bedroom home for 123 years, and we've had evidence in January. 2 people are trying to sell their houses. 1 lost a house sale when the proposed buyers found out about the HMO application. And Sam, just up there, she lost several house viewings due to the HMO because nobody in their right mind is going to want to live next door to one. We've got a quiet street, safe for our children, and we would like to keep it that way. The 50-metre threshold is unfair. 51 properties have been captured within a radius. However, just outside the radius, there are actually 7 HMOs within a 2-minute walk, and that is deemed acceptable to park your car for a vehicle according to the council. There are 3 on Fair Oak Avenue, 3 on Albert Avenue, and 1 on Summerhill Avenue. We feel the 50-metre radius needs to be extended to show the true picture of the HMO saturation in this area. As I said, there's 7 within a 2-minute walk of Jackson Place. Parking is also a major issue. The parking survey supplied by LRJ Planning claims to have found 30 parking spaces. However, only 11 pictures have been supplied as part of that survey. 2 pictures indicate parking at drop curves, something which is illegal and subject to a parking fine. According to the map of the survey, they included several parking permit spaces, even though the photos were supposedly taken on the 11th of October. One of the pictures also appears in a parking survey 451 Albert Avenue, which was approved long before the 11th of October, casting doubt on the veracity of the report. Also, 200 metres is a ludicrous distance to be parking a car. As a general rule of thumb, you want to be within a car alarm distance and ideally visible from the resident's house. The car alarm criterion rules out Fair Oak Avenue, most of Summerhill and the bottom of Albert Ave. On this revised criterion, using the questionable figures of the parking survey, you'd be lucky to find 3 parking spaces relevant to Jackson Place, and none of these would be in the actual street itself. I'd also like to call out comments made by the planning officer regarding the parking survey for Gibbs Road HMO application. This was submitted by the same company using the same mythology as Jackson Place, yet the report for Gibbs Road has said the parking survey was of limited use, and the survey findings cannot be accepted due to the mythology that was used. Both surveys use the same mythology, yet why is Jackson Place acceptable and Gibbs Road isn't? We also have great concerns over antisocial behaviour, and these concerns are not unfounded. We've spoken firsthand to people who live next door to HMOs. They've had their windows smashed in and all sorts of other horror stories. My front door, as you've seen in those photos, is just 45 centimetres separation from the 2 front doors. That's just longer than a standard ruler. That house was built as a family home, and those doors were built close together. If 5 unrelated people are in that house, what is going to be going on with that door? All times of the night, that was not going to happen with a family, is it? We've also got a bit of experience with HMO. It's already been mentioned at number 14. Again, this is not unfounded. These guys over here, they suffered for 5 years. Half a different people lived in that house. The council warden service was ineffective in dealing with it. And in the end, the police had to get involved because one resident of the HMO attacked 4 people in the street, and subsequently that HMO was shut down. Also, the council seemed to have no plan of when HMOs go bad. Only 3 paragraphs of the 26-page document on licensing of HMOs relate to antisocial behaviour. They put the onus on solving the issue with the landlord. As the above scenario explains, it doesn't work unless the police get involved. Council website has a 1,400-word document in planning, but not a single line about one who reports a failing HMO2. And this has been a problem for more than a decade. And until the council have a robust policy of action in dealing with this issue, the council should cease licensing HMOs. Also, there's a major issue in the area with rubbish around HMOs. It's just disgusting. We've been round and we've looked at them, and we've got photo evidence of it. The council's own licensing documents make it up to the owners to deal with it, and this is obviously not happening in Main D because it's disgusting. Also, we wanted to point out there's a large holly tree situated in the rear garden of number 11. There's no mention of this in the application nor in the officer's report. The tree is blocking light into my garden and next door's garden. Where's the tree survey? And just to finish, we've got civil servants, Newport council workers, NHS, elderly, etc., living in this street. We've got a fantastic spirit. We've got the guys here out supporting me today. We want to keep our children safe, and we urge you to keep number 11 as a family home.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll say we also have the ward councillors here to speak. Councillor Hussain.
Councillor Hussain for Victoria Ward. I agree with everything Tegan has said. I've received numerous emails from residents of the objections against this planning application, which, like Tegan has mentioned, are not unfounded. There has been a bad experience from a past HMO on Jackson Place, again because of the antisocial behaviour, because of the assaults, the police, which resulted in the police having to be called many, many times, and that HMO was shut down. But that's not to say that just because it happened to that one, it's not going to happen again. It will. It usually does. I've had experiences in my own street about exactly the same thing. The occupants of, the residents of Jackson Place, like Tegan has mentioned, are all family homes. They're all families. They've all got, young children, and they'd like to keep 11 Jackson Place as a family home. If you're going to allow so many, several occupants to live together, there's obviously, some of those occupants will be car owners, and the property is on cul-de-sac, so parking is a very big issue already, which will only exacerbate the issue with a HMO with 5 occupants. And just, the parking is going to be very dangerous. I just agree with everything they're saying. Like I said, a lot of the residents have been in touch with us, with both of us, and we do, agree, and we believe that this HMO should be refused.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Orton, would you like to add anything without repeating everything, please?
Firstly, sorry for being a little bit delayed, Chair. A catastrophic system failure in work. There's nothing else that I can add to what's already been said. Okay, there just isn't. Unfortunately, as Grant has very eloquently displayed, this property fits all of the criteria which are required. And there's nothing we can't argue against that. There's nothing we can say about that. We all know that. But what this really comes down to is the the upheaval and the pain and the suffering that the residents of the street have already gone through and have already experienced, and they feel they will continue to experience this. Now, this is a HMO for 5 people. Essentially, what the residents are asking you for is to think, if we stick a family that comes in here, it's going to be 5, maybe 6 people moving into a family home in a family street with a bunch of residents that are all family people that are looking to maintain their family environment. So, like I said, I cannot say any more eloquently what has already been stated by the lovely people sat next to me and the residents that are behind me. Now, I know you don't normally see this many residents turn up to a planning committee, so this in itself should show the committee the feeling by the residents of what is going on within their area. Now, I know through conversations that we've already had with the planning department that there is a low percentage of HMOs that fall within this area. But as a city, we are seeing more and more HMOs. We are seeing more and more residents come forward saying that they do not want this, we do not want this. What I'm asking you today is to vote with your hearts, because essentially that is what we're affecting. We're affecting the hearts of the people that live in our city. And I cannot say any more than that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll now open the floor to the committee for any questions. Councillor Mogford.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's interesting to take note of everything that's been said by the residents and Councillor Horton, saying vote with your heart is one thing, but as a planning committee, we've got to vote with the facts, unfortunately. If we were to weigh up the pros and cons of HMOs purely on the impact of the area, cost-benefit, if you like, my heart supports the residents, yeah. But it's a difficult one. Thank you.
Councillor Reynolds.
Thank you, Chair. I've got to be honest, I really am conflicted on this. I mean, similar to what Councillor Montfort just said. I've raised this before in planning, that as a planning committee, obviously, we are constrained by the planning regulations and the guidance that we have to go by. The presentation that Grant's given has indicated that this HMO obviously does satisfy all the legal criteria. But I've raised myself previously, things like parking surveys, the 50-metre radius for looking for concentrations of HMOs can be a little bit arbitrary, where you've got a number of HMOs fractionally outside that radius, but as far as the local community is concerned, or the local area is concerned, has a big impact. It's very hard to ignore 80 objections from one area on a human level. It's very hard to ignore that, and as Councillor Horton said, the number of people that have turned up today is quite unusual for a planning committee. So on a human level, it's really difficult to ignore that. But then we do have to sit as a planning committee, not as councillors. We are sat here as planning committee members, governed by planning committee rules. And the fact is, if we refuse this and it goes to appeal, all the objections in the world won't alter the fact that an appeals committee will look at the facts and say, we've satisfied the criteria, there's no grounds for refusal. It's really, really difficult, and I am very conflicted, I've got to be honest, really conflicted.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Howells.
Thanks, Chair. I'd echo the comments really from both Councillor Mogford and Councillor Reynolds. I think in design terms, this is a very good example of a HMO. Committee members will be aware that I'm a bit of a stickler for sort of bedroom sizes and over-design. The fact that the original application was 6-bed and now they've no doubt listened to officers' feedback and brought into a more realistic 5-bedroom property that isn't overdeveloped means that it is very good in design terms. Just one comment that the public speaker, who I'm afraid I didn't catch the name of, raised was around the parking survey, and I just wanted to get officers' reply on that in relation to the similar methodology criticised at the Gibbs Roads HMO parking strategy. And also, I note the sort of officer photos were all daytime photos. Has any evening work been undertaken to establish the parking requirements in the evening, where often there's more requirement for spaces? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Grant?
Thank you. So in terms of the parking survey, I didn't deal with the Gibbs Road case, so I'm not entirely sure what the highways officer highlighted there. But what we can say is we have consulted with the highways officer as a technical consultee on this application, and they've assessed that parking survey, and they are satisfied with the quality of that and what it shows. I've also been out at various times, daytime and evening, and what I've seen is consistent really with what has been shown in that parking survey. That parking survey does show 100% capacity on Jackson Street during the evening. I think it was in the middle of the night that the survey was taken, which is the recommended time for parking surveys, as they generally will be the time where most residents are home. Sorry, something's just gone with the screen. Shall I carry on or wait a second? There we go. We've reviewed that. We've looked at that ourselves, as well as relying on the technical consultee, and have acknowledged in the report that parking demand is high across the survey area. However, what we've seen is consistent with the parking survey in the fact that there is availability for the provision of the 3 additional spaces which are generated by this development. I think one final thing I'll just add is that in local objections, there were some concerns that the parking survey was taken during the evening and not the daytime, and there were uses within the area that would contribute to parking demand within the daytime. So, which is why we've also been out ourselves. Well, I've been out myself during various times of the day to obviously assess that as well.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Screen?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It is a very difficult one. I agree with Councillor Reynolds. It's extremely difficult. I can see both points of view. I am concerned that if we don't approve this, then it might well go. It'll probably go to appeal, and the possibility of losing it. The only other thing I can think of is the long-term impact. Would there be any monitoring of the property to see that it is being managed properly and not to the detriments of the other residents? But no, it is a very difficult one to make a decision on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Andrew, can you answer that?
Yeah, that's fine. So, yeah, I mean, first and foremost, as in planning, we are looking at the acceptability of the land use of the property. So, if we establish that this is acceptable and the applicant goes forward with the proposal to develop it as a HMO, it will require a separate licence under separate legislation from the Council's Environmental Health and Licensing Department. That then will be the sort of the way of managing that property moving forward under the licensing regime, which will need to be renewed. I'm not sure how frequently, to be perfectly honest, but it will need to be renewed at different times moving forward as it is used as a HMO. So I would say that is the sort of the regulations and licence that is required for the future management of the property.
Okay, thank you. Does any other committee members have a question? No? Okay. We should go to the vote. And the recommendation is, this is granted with conditions which are on page 27 and 28. Can I please have a proposer? Sorry?
Can I just, on reflection, listening to the debate, Chair, I'm going to I'm having to declare an interest, and I will not vote. I will abstain.
Sorry?
I will not vote on this. On listening to the debate, I think I need to declare an interest, and I will not vote.
Okay.
The interest is actually on the council website. Actually, it's registered as one of my interests.
Registered as what? Sorry.
I said it's an interest that is declared. It's on the council website. My particular interest that makes me feel I need to not take part in the vote. Okay.
Well, it's a bit late now, isn't it? Okay. Can I just advise then, for future, please, if you're not going to vote, you must abstain, I think. In future, if you have an interest, you need to leave the room. I know you're new to this, Councillor Cox, so I will explain that you need to leave the room in future so you don't listen.
Well, I apologise. If I should have done that, I apologise. I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you. So, again, the recommendation that it is granted with conditions. Can I please have a proposer? Yeah, could the twos on yeah, put the screen right. Councillor Errol, seconder. Councillor Perkins, yeah. All those in favour of the application, please raise hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those against?
Sorry, Chair, did you vote?
Sorry? Yeah,
okay.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, yeah. And those against? Those abstaining? Okay, thank you very much. So that is passed, and that will go ahead. Thank you very much. Thank you for speaking. Take a minute. You can stay for the next, if you wish. If you don't, please, you can throw it. Okay, thank you. We'll now move on to item number 2. Before we start, could I ask and confirm you've all had the late representation that was sent out yesterday? Yeah? Okay. Thank you. This is application 23/01633. Sorry, 0163. And this will be presented by Jacob Cook. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The application is presented to members of the Planning Committee for consideration as a proposal as a major type of development. The proposal would require demolition of the existing commercial units, and separate demolition consent is in place permitting the demolition already. The proposal seeks to erect 43 1- and 2-bedroom residential apartments, along with landscaping, off-street parking. The scheme seeks to provide 51% affordable housing and 49% private housing. The Section 106 agreement will ensure 51% is provided. A total of 85 properties were consulted on the scheme. 8 objections have been received from third parties. Councillor Druitt also commented on the scheme, requesting any Section 106 contributions be put toward local leisure projects. Councillor Evans and Foulweather object to the scheme regarding highways access, parking, density, amenity space, character and appearance, and the type of flatted residential development proposed. Members will notice the Blue Edge area north of 32 Doss Cottages. This area is under the ownership of the applicant, however no works are proposed in this area. The site inclines from east to west, therefore the road level at Queen's Hill is higher than the road level of Factory Road. To the south and west of the application site lies terrace residential properties. To the north lies the Church of Latter-day Saints, and to the east lies existing commercial properties. To the rear of Dos Cottages, the land beyond the rear garden boundary is a piece of unregistered land. We're now standing on Factory Road with the application site to the left of the photograph. You will note the BT building in the background for reference. The application site is fronted with a high boundary wall growing with vegetation growing above. That vegetation is Japanese knotweed. Above the Japanese knotweed, we can see the existing commercial units of the site. We're now looking at the existing vehicle access from Factory Road. We can see a lamppost adjacent to the boundary wall and the incline of the access with the main commercial buildings beyond and the bank of trees situated to the rear of the building. Moving left along Factory Road, we can now see the residential properties on Lucas Street. We're now looking toward the corner of Lucas Street and we can see the existing period properties which feature buff brick with stone inserts. Now moving into the yard area in the commercial unit, we're looking at the properties on Lucas Street. This is the rear elevations. As you can see, they do not feature first floor windows in the rear extensions. However, they do feature windows on the original rear elevation there. Now looking slightly right, still at the properties on Lucas Street, we can see that several properties here have inserted first floor windows in those rear extensions. Now we've moved to the rear of the site and we're stood on the piece of land where no development is proposed. To the left we can see 32 Dos Cottages and straight ahead is Queen's Hill. This photo shows where the rear boundary of Dos Cottages ends, the piece of unregistered land behind, and then the existing trees. The TPO fir tree is located in the middle of these trees. On the right of the drawing is the rear elevation of the main building. Members will notice the existing retaining wall for reference. To the left of the photo it shows the trunks of the existing cypress trees. This photo shows the trunk of the TPO fir tree, which can be seen it lies outside of the application site within the piece of unregistered land. So that boundary there is the boundary for the application site. Here we can see the existing retaining wall. Members, I'd ask you to note how the wall is leaning and showing signs of failure. We're now turning to the proposed layout. The scheme comprises of 2 apartment blocks forming the 1 and 2 bedroom units in an L-shaped arrangement. There are 43 car parking spaces proposed, with each residential unit having 1 allocated parking space. Secure cycle parking is located in the lower ground floor, with visitor cycle parking located to the outside areas within the site. The access onto Factory Road is to be improved to ensure suitable visibility between pedestrians and vehicles, and a turn-in head is located within the site. Centrally located, we have the communal amenity space, which also serves part of the sustainable drainage strategy for the site. The trees annotated on the drawing are indicative, with final details of landscaping to be submitted by condition. Members will notice the orange line that follows the proposed access route. That line denotes the diversion of a combined sewer, which is required to facilitate the development, as currently the combined sewer crosses the site across the top right corner there. The proposed apartment blocks are set back from the edge of the footway onto Factory Road. We're now looking at the proposed elevations. So this drawing shows the east and west elevations. The top drawing here is the elevation facing Factory Road, with the bottom drawing excuse me, with the bottom drawing showing the elevation from within the application site. So that's as if you've come into the site and turned and you're within the parking area looking in. The top drawing shows the proposal has a stepped height ranging from 9.4 metres there to 15.6 metres there, and then 18.5 across the top. The bottom drawing shows the apartment block on the left also has a stepped height, as we can see there and there. We're now looking at the north and south elevations. So the top drawing shows the elevation facing the Church of the Latter-day Saints. The windows members can see on this elevation would serve the communal corridors, providing access to the residential units. The bottom drawing shows the elevation facing the rear elevation of the properties on Lucas Street. So this portion of the elevation is the portion which is closest to the boundary with Lucas Street. Members may note the doors and windows proposed on this elevation, those three there. These doors and windows serve from top to bottom. That's a maintenance door to lead out onto the roof space, a bedroom window, and a staircase. The external elevations are formed of two types of brick, which alternate across two residential blocks in order to provide visual interest and a break in the built form. This scale massing is also broken up due to the separation between the two blocks. Turning to amenity afforded to future occupants. All residential units meet or exceed the internal floor space requirements for 1 and 2 bedroom properties. All residential units are provided with private amenity space which meets and exceeds the desired standards within the New Dwellings SPG document. This space is in the form of balconies, with the lower ground floor units also benefiting from their own private gardens. With regard to communal amenity space, this is centrally located within the site and equates to 881 square metres. Now looking at some section drawings. This shows the apartment block's relationship with the properties on Lucas Street. Members will note the dashed red line. This shows the scale and massing of the existing commercial units, with the grey lines showing the stepped residential blocks. Members will also notice the separation distance between 19 Lucas Street and the proposed apartment block. That distance is 19.5 metres. Also, taking a 25-degree line from the rear elevation of Lucas Street, we can see that the proposed apartment block does not breach this 25-degree line. As such, the proposal would not result in a loss of daylight and sunlight entering those properties on Lucas Street. Also, excuse me. Also, the height of the 3-storey element does not exceed the height of those properties on Lucas Street, as we can see here. The ridge of the property on Lucas Street is higher than that highest point of the 3-storey block. Due to the site layout, the separation distance, the rear elevation of 15 Lucas Street increases. This increases to 21.6 metres. Showing a further section, this drawing shows the section details, showing the relationship between the residential properties proposed and those existing on Queen's Hill. As members can see, the dotted red line again outlines the existing commercial units, with the outline of the proposed apartment blocks behind. The separation distance between the rear elevation of Dots Cottages and the closest elevation of the apartment block is 39.7 metres. This distance increases with the apartment block that faces Factory Road to 64 metres. A visual impact assessment has been submitted with the application, focusing on 6 views from around the application site. These sites are Christchurch Road, Riverside, the A4042, Factory Road, Queen's Hill and Queen's Hill Crescent. I'll take you through each of these in turn. The top photograph shows the existing view, with the bottom photograph showing the proposed view, and that will be the same across the next few slides. Looking from Christchurch Road toward the application site, we can see that far-reaching views are achieved, and we can see the proposed development just sort of blends into the built form of the urban environment. Now looking from the Riverside location, we can see the BT building to the right of the picture with a proposed development centrally located within the picture. It's also worth noting that the proposed building is at a lower height than the BT building. We're now looking toward the application site from the A4042. The commercial buildings in the foreground are located east of the application site. From this view, we can see the scale and massing of the proposal in the context of the wider character of the area. We've now moved directly onto Factory Road. We can see the appearance of the existing derelict commercial units and the proposed residential units, which are set back from the footway, and the appearance softened somewhat by the indicative landscaping scheme. We've now moved up through the site onto Queenshill Crescent. Members will note that the apartment blocks do not exceed the height of Doss Cottages when viewed from Queenshill Crescent. That is annotated by that yellow highlight there. This last CGI image, it shows the view from Queen's Hill. This shows that partial views are achieved of the apartment blocks just there, stretching behind the rest of the properties. This drawing shows the existing trees, vegetation, and non-native invasive species that are on the site. Japanese knotweed is spread across several locations around the site, but is mostly prevalent along Factory Road. The areas and trees shaded red are to be removed in order to facilitate the development. The trees to the rear of the existing building are to be removed, and this includes the TPO'd fir tree. The total number of trees to be removed, as shown on the drawing, total 44. All trees on site are category C or U as set out within the tree survey report. The reason for their removal is due to the demolition of the building and the failing retaining wall which holds the bank would affect the stability of the bank and the trees themselves. To rebuild the retaining wall would inevitably result in damage to the root areas of the trees, thereby further impacting their retention. The tree officer has raised no objections to the loss of these trees due to their status and contribution toward the street scene. According to Planning Policy Wales, this sets out that where trees are lost, there is to be a clearly defined public benefit. In this case, the clearly defined public benefit is the delivery of affordable housing to serve the residents of Newport. Where trees are lost, Planning Policy Wales sets out that replacement trees shall be planted at a ratio of 3:1. The Council's Wildlife SPG sets out this ratio should be 1.5:1. This would equate to replacement trees to be planted on the site of either 132 or 66. The constraints of the site, the constraints of the site mean this number of trees could not be planted on the site. The indicative landscaping scheme does provide some replacement planting. The species, size and number are to be confirmed by condition. The ecology officer has stated the ecological value of the site is low. Therefore, the landscaping scheme will provide the biodiversity enhancement required, and these details are controlled by condition also. Turning to refuse management, this drawing shows the lower ground floor of the apartment blocks proposed. This features dedicated waste and recycling storage, which can be accessed internally from all residential units. The external doors lead onto Factory Road. The setback of the buildings means that there is a dedicated area for the bins to be put out on collection days within the red edge of the site. This is to ensure that any bins would not impact the use of the footway. To ensure these points are not blocked by vehicles on collection days, 3 H-bars are proposed to be painted on the road to dictate no parking in these areas. To summarise the scheme, To summarise, the scheme seeks to provide 43 residential units, of which 51% are affordable housing. The Section 106 planning contributions will be put towards improvements into local leisure facilities. Each residential unit would have their own off-street parking space and cycle storage, along with private amenity space and communal amenity space. The proposal would not result in adverse impacts with regard to existing residential properties due to separation distances. The recommendation is to grant with conditions and subject to the signing of a Section 106 agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jacob. We don't have any public speakers, so I'll open the floor up to the committee. Anybody got any questions, please?
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the scheme, I think it's an improvement on the area of land that it's going to now be sitting on. Totally aesthetically, it matches in with the surrounding area. And I think it's excellent that we're getting greater social housing, over 50% within Newport now, because we're housing, we're under great pressure for our youngsters and the like, so I think this will be a good asset. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Any questions? Anyone else? Councillor Jones.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just going back to reference to the trees being cut down and the ratio is recommended, but we're cutting down the ratio to the lowest point. Is there any way we can get a donation to trees being planted in the area to compensate? Because that road is quite busy with air quality and such like that. If you know the area, there's always traffic jams there. But the loss of trees, I know we're meeting a criteria, lowest point of entry point, but can we get donations and plant trees near the schools or in other areas to compensate?
Due to the quality of the trees of being such a low ecological value, the view was taken to not seek, say, a contribution through a Section 106 for that, to do an off-site compensation package.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, thank you. Can we, the proposal... Sorry, Councillor Howells.
Thanks, Chair. 2 points, if I may. One, just correcting Councillor Linton's point, there's no offer of social housing on this site. It's an offer of affordable housing, which is slightly different, and I just wanted some clarification on that in relation to 2 things, really. Why Newport City Homes are not building social housing for allocation onto the housing waiting list, because if you note the head of housing's comments in this report, he's disappointed with the offer here, and it doesn't meet housing needs because these are intermediate market rents and open market rents rather than social housing rents. So I've got some concern about that, which perhaps the planning contributions manager can help us with. And the second question, and I don't know whether we have the answer, is whether any social housing grant is going into the scheme from the council.
Just with regard to the social housing grant, I don't know the answer to that, Councillor, but just touching on the types of affordable housing. Within the TAN document, there's 2 types of affordable housing that meet the definition. One is interim rent and one is social rent. From a planning point of view, they've met their obligations by providing a form of affordable housing. That mix of whether it's social or interim rent, my understanding is that's a discussion with the housing delivery manager.
Alan, would you like to come in at this juncture?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I wasn't aware that housing, the comments that housing have made, but what Jacob has just said is absolutely correct. It's TAN compliant, you know, it's in line with the guidelines, so it's deemed affordable. The fact that it's not, you know, social rent is probably a little bit by the by. That's a decision between, between with Pobble really, and with Pobble and Welsh Government with the social housing grant.
Okay, Councillor Owls, you happy with that?
If I can then, so I think it was a Newport City Homes rather than Pobble, this property, but social housing grant is the decisions made in relation to it are by our housing team, and I can't support this application today until I know whether social housing grant is going into the scheme or not. If social housing grant is going into the scheme, then we must insist as part of that grant that the properties are allocated through the council's common housing register. So I need to know that information before I can support this application today. So my view would be that we have to adjourn this until we find out whether any social housing grant is going into the scheme from our housing team.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. From a planning policy perspective, as I said, we're securing affordable housing that complies with the relevant definitions contained in the TAN, and that is above the policy compliant position. Whether we as a council would put social housing grant, we'd have control over that as a council, but that would be independent of a planning decision that sought to secure 51% affordable housing on site, which is what it is we're doing.
Okay.
Thanks, Andrew.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other further questions or comments? No? Okay. Yeah. Councillor Screen, can you put your video on, please, now?
Right, Chair?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So, the recommendations are granted with conditions, which is in the pack. So, could I have a proposer, please? Councillor Jones, second. Councillor Linton. All those in favour, please vote. That's passed unanimously. Thank you very much. All the relevant paperwork in the document is then for information purposes. Thank you very much for attending. Thank you. Sorry. One sec.
Sorry, members. You'll note in the report pack there is a report on the annual monitoring report. So I was just going to give a very brief, it wasn't meant to be me, but it's, I was going to give a very brief presentation on this. And then, as I said, if there are any questions or anything you want to ask, then yeah, we'll do our best to answer. So I'm just going to share my screen now. Okay, so we are required by statute to provide an annual monitoring report into the LDP. So we're bringing this to you now. The report was actually submitted in October of last year and covers the period of the 1st of April 2022 to the 31st of March last year. So it's last financial year. It's the main mechanism for reviewing the relevance and performance of the LDP. Obviously, we were out to consultation on the preferred strategy between October and December, so there was no good time to bring it. So this is the first available opportunity we've managed to bring it this year. So it provides, as I said, the basis for monitoring the effectiveness of the LDP. There are various indicators in there, as you'll see. There's 4 contextual indicators at a very high level, 35 core and local indicators, and then 84 sustainability appraisal indicators. So on the right-hand side here, these are the contextual indicators. You'll note for the first 3, we've got positive outcomes. So that is the number of reported crime incidents by type as a total has decreased. Economic activity rates of Newport residents has increased. And the number of Newport residents who are commuting out of the authority has decreased as well. So the one negative you'll note on there is the number of lower super output areas in the 10 most deprived lower super output areas in Wales. Just for context, the last time we had this information was 2019. So there's been no change, as you can see on the right-hand side, for a number of years there. That's just something that when we get that information, it will remain the same for several years. In terms of economic activity rates, you will see the top line there, the one that's the most stable, is the UK rate, which is the number of people who are permanently, or some number of people who are employed. The orange line at the bottom is the Welsh data set, and the line that jumps around a bit more is the Newport average. Now, we have more variance because it does depend. We're using a smaller sample size than both Wales and the UK, but what it does show is in the last year, economic activity rates in Newport have increased. This is an overall summary of the core and local indicators. You'll see, I think it's on page 83 of your report. It gives an indication of what kind of things are required. So this is looking at the LDP. The positive outcomes are things that are improving, things that we're doing as we should. We've got a number of indicators which suggest that training might be required. No indicators suggesting new supplementary planning guidance is required. 11 indicators indicating some further research is required, and that is then discussed between the planning policy officers who collate this information and the development management officers who are obviously writing the reports that we bring to you for decisions. So just in terms of the core and local indicators, some of the key headline positives. You know, we provide a lot of housing on brownfield land, that's previously developed land. So 91% of housing in the year 2022-23 was provided on brownfield land. And again, in the last financial year, we provided 13.4 hectares of employment land were granted planning permission. So that gives an overall total of 43 hectares. We didn't lose any B-class employment sites or EM1 allocations that were contrary to LDP policies. And again, job growth has increased this year. One of the things we do look at is in terms of sites of importance for nature conservation, green belt, green wedge, the other protected land, and none were lost contrary to LDP policies in that period. 5 renewable energy schemes were approved, and no community facilities have been lost. And again, no permissions were granted contrary to advice from DCWW, Dŵr Cymru, or highways officers. So these are just indicators of how the LDP is performing. There are some that do require further research. So over the LDP period, we have provided 7,482 new homes have been delivered. That is short of the LDP target. We should have another 798, but overall, we're performing quite well. Of those 7,500, 1,550 were affordable homes delivered in the plan period. Again, we are slightly short of the LDP target, but this is the 8th year we're doing it, and as I said, we're not far off. We do have some further work which is needed in terms of areas within floodplains. So you might recall that obviously a couple of years ago the Welsh Government were looking to update the draft technical advice note on flooding. That hasn't come through yet, so we're still waiting on that. So there is still some tensions, I suppose, or between the actual policy and the flood maps that we have to consider. And there are some other things, as I said, you'll see that we do need further research into. So that's just looking into it to see whether the policy needs to be updated going forward. This is just a very quick graph showing housing delivery rates. The greens are the ones that have been delivered. The last 3 columns are the anticipated future delivery. What you'll see there is a high peak pre-COVID, where we were exceeding the number of houses. So we try and aim to achieve 690 dwellings delivered on an annual basis. Last year we delivered 619, so slightly lower than the average. But you'll note 2 years there, which were the COVID years, where things slowed down and stopped. And what it is showing is since then, obviously in that year, there's been a positive bounce back, which is positive. There are some indicators that suggest that further training is required. So as I said, we have had a training session with officers just to feed this back to them. And what we tend to find on these ones are specific policies not being explicitly referenced in the officer report. So they might have been alluded to, but there will be some in there that weren't specifically referenced. And you'll note on there, for example, development density. So in Jacob's report, we referred to that. The Factory Road development was a very high density. That's obviously positive in terms of the use of land. But you'll note there that we also get some in terms of permissions affecting sites of historical value. So the indicators here is any time we go contrary to the advice of a heritage advisor. There were 2 such cases last year. One was comments provided by an outside archaeological body. The proposals were amended, but we didn't get any further comments back to say that they were satisfied. So whilst we as officers were satisfied they'd been addressed, it goes down as an indicator on here that training might be required. And the other one was an internal one where officers considered the heritage officer's advice and considered the proposals acceptable. So there's always going to be those things. You'll note the one in green there, permissions granted contrary to NRW advice. So this was the last financial year. This was an application that was made by committee. In terms of the retail store on, I want to say Albert Street, Albany Street, thank you, which, as I said, there were material considerations, but it's just an indicator that things, we need to keep an eye on why decisions are being made contrary to advice and looking at whether we need any further training required for members and or officers. So, okay, this is the last slide anyway, pretty much. So yeah, it's just in summary, obviously we're 8 years into the LDP process. Build rates are still reasonably strong, and we're obviously started the process of the replacement local development plan, which will look at the indicators, look at the policies, see how they're working and how they need to be updated going forward. There's also further training, guidance and clarification required with regards to some of the things I've just talked about. So yeah, that is also ongoing. Obviously, we're preparing the replacement local development plan at the moment. You'll see there that we are towards the bottom. So we're on the 2 green ones at the moment. We've gone out for the preferred strategy consultation, published the candidate sites register, requested a call for sites. And the next stage will be to bring the deposit plan back to you, all being well, later this year in October, November. So this is where, as I said, we'll look at how the policies have worked, whether they need to change, which ones are working well over the next 6, 7, 8 months, and then bring a revised deposit plan that we as officers and hope you as members will be happy to support to encourage the future sustainable growth of Newport going forward. Thank you, Chair. Any questions?
Councillor Markwood.
Thank you, Chair. 2 questions. We're seeing the Welsh Government taking an approach to farmers where they're looking to reduce the available farming land by getting farmers to plant trees. There's a lot of pressures on the farming community at the moment. Net result, anyway, is that potentially the amount of available farming land in Wales productive farming land could reduce. With the LDP, we're also seeing the brownfield sites are all but used. How would that policy and other similar policies perhaps affect the LDP going forward? Do you understand the question? Have I made it clear?
So, both greenfield land is a finite resource. But the planting of trees, a policy such as that recommended by Welsh Government wouldn't relate to development per se, because the planting of trees isn't development. This is what the development plan's looking at. But what we do have is obviously the Welsh Government are promoting and have a strong emphasis on the protection of the best and most versatile agricultural land in the first instance. That's something that we consider in terms of when we look at our allocations. So we've brought a growth and spatial options appraisal previously, looking at whether we can, Welsh Government hierarchy suggests we look at previously developed land. We've done that rather successfully, as we've just shown, in terms of the current LDP, and that is the preferred approach. But what we need to do is where there isn't enough land, we need to look at the least constrained land that provide the opportunities for future growth going forward.
Second question. I'll put the question simply, but I might need to drill down. Who are we building the houses for in Newport?
Well, Newport's growing. It's a national growth area, so it's for the people of Newport. So effectively, the population is growing, continues to grow, and we want Newport to grow sustainably. So that's what it's about. It's about enabling the sustainable development of Newport and creating more jobs in Newport for the people of Newport.
Okay, there's a discussion for another time there. Thank you.
Any further questions? No? Okay. Sorry, Councillor Cox.
Can I ask, who's the intended audience for this?
So this goes back to the Welsh Government, effectively. But what we want to do is bring it to you as members, because you're making decisions on planning committee, and sometimes you don't see the end result of what it is we as a planning authority provide. So it's for Welsh Government. We have to obviously undertake an assessment of whether we are complying with the LDP, whether it's functioning as it should. If it wasn't, then sometimes we might have to commence a replacement local development plan. So that's what it seeks to do. It's a check and balance about accountability. But we're bringing this to you for information, so you're aware. Right. And next year we will do the same, and we'll bring another report in terms of the performance of the development management and enforcement section to you later this year.
So it's not that generally intended for the wider public?
It's not. It's publicly available. So as I said, it's on the website the last 8 years. But as I said, it doesn't tend to foster too much interest.
Okay. Well, just very briefly, I mean, the reason I asked that actually is because I'm just interested in the layout of it, because I must say that, I think over the years in the career I've had, that I've spent a lot of time reading reports and writing reports, and I just thought it could have been a little easier to follow. I mean, so for example, there's the executive summary comes first, which is the conclusions, yeah? And in fact, the executive summary is nothing about the conclusions, actually. It's just setting out the context of it and the requirement, which actually is just also repeating exactly virtually the same wording in the introduction. And then the introduction actually then talks about the levels of success in relation to different criteria, which I would have thought should have. I just thought the order of it was a little confusing, and it was a bit off-putting as well to find the first sort of 6 pages with just lists of tables, which which perhaps, if you were going to get somebody to open it up and think, well, this looks really interesting, I'd really like to read this, might have gone a bit later in the report. So that was my main issues were really about the way I thought it was laid out.
No, that's appreciated. As I said, this is something we've got to do annually, and we can look into that for next year.
Okay. And can I ask one question, Chair, please, about it? That I was quite surprised, actually, when at the introduction, the section on fairness and equality, which basically, correct me if I've got this wrong, but it basically says something to the effect that there's no need to carry out any kind of equality impact assessment because this report isn't going to change anything, basically. It's just a monitoring report recording what's happened rather than setting new policy. And I'll tell you that equality is it's one of the major legal responsibilities on the council to ensure that it's promoting diversity, to ensure that the council is looking if there are inequalities in the provision of services. And I mean, in terms of this report, it just seemed there were so many areas in this report where there could have potentially been an impact on equality in terms of the people maybe who are benefiting from the various aspects of the policy, or the plan, or people who might be disadvantaged as a consequence of it. I mean, one that jumps out actually is Gypsies and Travellers, there's a real issue there, obviously, about the equality, the extent to which we're meeting the Equality Act in relation to that. But the introduction seemed to dismiss equality as if it wasn't really a concern of this report. But I just wondered, if that is the case, where are we noting the equality outcomes of the local development plan, and how is that getting fed into the next one?
So the process is set out by statute that we have to follow in terms of reviewing the local development plan via this annual monitoring report. And what it looks at are whether the policies are achieving their aims in the grand scheme of things and taking the plan as a whole. The plan was subject to an equality impact assessment. Every decision we make, we have to consider the statutory duties. You'll note those are in the officer's report all the time. So there is an equality indicator in the LDP, but I believe that's the case. But as I said, if there's anything else, so one of the team is online, John Gibson. So unless there's anything you want to add, John, to that, then please feel free to do so. Don't have to.
John? I've got to make a cup of tea over here.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, hi there. Just in terms of the question you were asking about the AMR and the need for an equality impact assessment, just to clarify, sorry, versus what the equality work for the local development plan is, just to differentiate, sorry. Is that the question, sorry, that you're trying to clarify, or?
Yeah. So
sorry,
you
go on.
To put it in a nutshell, basically I'm just interested in to what extent the monitoring of the local development plan has an equalities element to it. In other words, we're actually looking at the extent to which various, groups under the listed under the Equality Act are benefiting or not benefiting by the plan as it progresses, and if that's then fed into the replacement plan.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as Andrew set out from the start, this document, the annual monitoring report's all about looking at the indicators that were identified for the current, the adopted local development plan, and the various indicators that that were approved by council at that time. So throughout that, we sort of monitor that, measure that, and that gets reviewed by Welsh Government as well. That equally informs what we're doing now with the replacement local development plan. So, the concerns you raised are, obviously very important. Equality is obviously very important and needs to dictate what those future policies will be for the local development plan. So the outcomes of these, annual monitoring reports do inform that, particularly where, Andrew highlighted some items where it's, further training required or further research required, and that directly leads to some of these policy considerations we're doing in this replacement local development plan. As part of the replacement local development plan specifically, there is a sort of a parallel process called an integrated sustainability appraisal, which does address all of those various equalities assessments we need to do. I think further down in the report that Andrew has submitted today, it outlines those for you. So it talks about equalities impact assessment, health impact assessments, Welsh language impact assessments, and that happens throughout the process. It's a document being prepared on behalf of the council as well to make sure that at each stage somebody else is assessing what we're doing to say, actually, yeah, you know what, you are considering the correct things, or maybe you need to have more regard to these kinds of issues. So it all forms part of that continuous feedback loop of what's happening on the ground, how is the current plan working, and then equally informing how we improve that for the next or the replacement local development plan that we're preparing. So hopefully that answers the question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Jones?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's a question for the officers really on HMO. So I'm not sure if I can ask a question now or whether I speak to Andrew directly. Am I okay to ask a question?
If Andrew's happy,
Yeah, by all means.
It's just clarification, really. With HMOs as a living basis, to me, I see it as a business because obviously there's somebody buying this property to develop into a HMO. And looking at our constraints on our waste and economical, environmental issues that we got on our budgets, is it not correct that somebody could see it as a business venture and we should be imposing at